Okay, we have this van here today. Gonna be doing some brakes on it. Obviously you can see that they're a little wet looking, and that's because this brake caliper decided to leak, which is no good. Had no brake pedal when it came in. So we'll be putting a brake caliper on it and rotors and pads on the back. It has some other work to get done, but for now we're just gonna be doing the back brakes. Okay, so we get the brake caliper off, 13 millimeter bolts. For some reason, this driver's side rear on Caravans is always the worst to get off. Sometimes you need to use like a pry bar to get in there. And then, yeah, 18 millimeter bolts on the back here. Get these mounting bolts off. So once we get that off, we can knock this rotor off. You can see that it's already loose on the hub, which is nice. Not gonna have to do any hammering. One thing that I like to kind of do with these really rusty bolts is just before they come free, I always like pull back on my ratchet to like break the seal between so that the bolt doesn't get stuck into the socket when you take the bolt out. Just something that you learn to do over the years. You could use a wrench to do this. They're pretty tight though. Or if you have the luxury of using an impact gun or pneumatic ratchet or battery powered ratchet, you could use that too. So we got our brake caliper holder, our brake pad holder. You can see the brake pads are actually still lots of friction material, which is sad. Unfortunately, they're contaminated with brake fluid. So we'll be cleaning these all up. Slider pins are still free. And yeah, normally you just throw these brake pads out. The brake fluid soaks into the pad material and they'll squeal and grunt and groan and carry on for the rest of their lives. You could try using brake cleaner to clean them out if you're desperate and you don't have brake pads or something to replace them with, but brake rotor luckily just come off just like that. I've never actually seen a brake caliper leak like that before around the piston. But I guess with the amount of rust and stuff, you know, the rust probably gets in behind this dust boot and then contaminates the sealing surface of the O-ring inside of there and probably gets in there and either wedges itself between the wall of the cylinder where the piston is or cuts the seal, and then brake fluid starts to leak past it. So time for a new one. Now what I like to do, the easy cheat to taking these calipers off is, you see this emergency brake line, it's gonna be a real pain to fight. There's a spring in here with a bunch of teeth that spread open like this when it comes through, and it won't let it go back through this bracket. So what you do is you just take a 12 or 13 millimeter socket and you take this nut off, and that nut holds this bracket on, which is the articulating bracket for that cable. And then you just use a hammer and knock that bracket free, knock it loose. You may have to take this spring off as well. And then once it comes off, that allows you to be able to clean and remove this cable without having to fight against the tension. Because if you just do it like this, now you've got to try to compress those little fingers while you're trying to pull it back through, and you're just fighting it the whole time. It's a real pain. So I'm gonna go grab a socket, we'll zip that thing off. All right, so we got a 13 millimeter socket on an impact gun. Let's go ahead and take this nut off. Okay, maybe it was a 12. I thought it was a 12. 13 fit pretty snug, but well, obviously it's rusty. So we get that nut off there, and this thing's getting sent back as a core return, so who gives a crap. Now, just grab yourself a hammer. And you may have to like work on this thing a bunch because this shaft that sticks through here that the nut threads onto, it's a spline shaft where this bracket goes onto. So just spend your time and hammer the crap out of it and try to break it free. There we go, so it's off now. And you can see that spring is still attached, so just you could use needle nose pliers or just be a savage like I was. Now, that little finger just goes, loops in there, so you take that out. I like to try to get all the rust off of this that I can. And also I do undo these ABS harnesses because sometimes they get tugged on. You can see like it's sort of hanging off that line a little bit. But it is what it is, you're gonna fight it. This thing's gonna move around a bunch. So now the next thing we gotta do is clean all the rust off of this bracket right here that this thing goes through. Because we need as much room for those fingers to depress back into a circular shape to go through the hole, right? So any dirt and stuff that gets trapped into there, that's going to really affect how far you can clamp those. And I actually have a tool that I like to use specifically for this job, and they're actually hose clamp pliers. And I'll show you what we can do using them. If you end up having the right size hose clamp pliers, you can see the circle. You just reach around like this with them, and you can sneak in there, and when you close them like that, it actually compresses all the 3 fingers around the side, so it makes it super easy, and then you can just work it through. So there's another hack for you if you're trying to get that off, for those guys out there that have a decent selection of tools. Now I'd probably, as far as cleaning this off, you can just use a flathead screwdriver, maybe some compressed air, a bit of brake clean, a pick, whatever you can use to clean it off, we'll get it cleaned off. So I'm gonna clean this off and we'll be right back. So we're gonna spend 10 minutes of our life that we'll never get back to remove this line that we're never gonna use. And I got everything all cleaned up. And I don't know if I can actually get this situated. It's sort of a pain because this cable like is in the way and everything just gets in the way. I think I grabbed the wrong ones here. Do I got smaller ones? Yeah, I got smaller ones. I've tried like using zip ties and stuff before too, but I find using this works the best. For some reason. There we go, okay. So yeah, you can see all those little fingers that stick out. Once you stick it through the hole, they spread out and then doesn't come back. But yeah, as long as you get all that rust and stuff out of there, for the most part, these work pretty good. Now, we need to check out our new caliper. That's always the one thing that you should get in the habit of if you're changing your own parts and all that stuff all the time, is open up the box, make sure that you got the right parts for the job before you get it to this point, and then realize that you ordered the wrong side. All right, so I try to get a lot of that rust scale off. I'm just gonna use a pick here and scrape some of that stuff off that I can't really get into. Just watch the line, like we don't want to crush the line or break it, even though it's super rusty. It would be nice to see a new line go on this, but obviously we are doing a budget repair. I'll get all this crap out of the way and then just use a little wire brush or something to scrape all that stuff off. Looks like we have a 11 millimeter banjo bolt that holds that line on. So I'm just gonna grab a socket, make sure that you have some new copper washers, gaskets there on the banjo bolts. Make sure you have some of those. As you tighten those down, they do crush. So it is important to use new ones when you install them. And just grab this 11 mil. Kind of work it on there, get all the rust off. That way it goes on and off easily so you can switch it out fast. Make sure that our new one is the same size, which it is. Sometimes they give you different size banjo bolts. Now I got everything ready to go. I got my caliper unbolted off the bracket here. So it's just ready to stick the line on and get everything situated. Just remember the orientation of the line, so the line goes down and away. So I'm just gonna use my impact gun, grab my socket that I just set down somewhere, and it's gonna puke out a bunch of fluid, totally normal. Or the system may be empty because it's been leaking, I don't know, one or the other. I keep the hole on the caliper upright, and before we stick a plug in this and send it back, it's a good idea to drain it out in the whatever approved recycling container or however you want to dispose of it. Don't dump it down the drain. But there's a plug that the new one comes with, stick that back in there. Stick this back in the bag. There is the bracket that's gonna go with it. I'm just sticking it in there for now. Now we can see all the rust scale and crap that's on there. We need to try to clean that off the best we can before we stick gaskets on there. There are line clamps that you can use to stop the brake fluid from leaking out. I'm just gonna try to be quick about this. And another thing to note, if you do use clamps, that a lot of these lines have like a steel braided core, and there's a potential for that line to actually then collapse if you crimp down on it. So just watch if you're using like vice grips or something like that. And we want to make sure that we don't get any of this rust and crap inside of there, because it's just gonna get into the line. It could jam up the banjo bolt. The hole's really not that big, so you could use some brake cleaner or some compressed air to make sure that that gets cleaned out. And now we're ready to grab our banjo bolt, new copper gasket. Remember, it sticks in there like that. So I'm gonna put this on, then I'm gonna start this washer on the other side. And that can just hang out for a second. Grab your brake caliper. Try to get everything lined up the best you can. Always start these bolts by hand. I've seen people cross-thread them. And then there will be a torque spec for that. I'm just gonna give it a couple braps with the impact gun. And then we just give it a little wash off with the brake cleaner again. And we'll make sure that everything's sealed up and that it's not leaking. So we'll just let that sit for a minute. In the meantime, we can prep our hub surface for the rotor to go on. And you can see this backing plate's bent. You can see how rotten it is. That's just a recipe for making noise right there. So probably just going to end up ripping that off and if you didn't have the bracket that comes with the caliper, which most do, but some of them aren't loaded, you can go ahead and remove the bracket and then take the clips off and clean underneath of them and all that stuff. So yeah. Okay, so we got the hub cleaned up now. The disc is on. We installed some anti-seize underneath of the clips here. That's just going to protect against rust. As you can see, this vehicle lives in a very rusty area. And then we're going to tighten those down. And then we can take our brake pads and we'll put some anti-seize on the ends of the brake pads as well, where they seat into those clips, which is also going to help. You can see that I've removed the backing plate because, like I say, it's just going to do nothing but end up falling into the rotor. It'll cause noise, and the customer will be wondering what's up, and then the vehicle will come back. So get those things off. I need my ratchet. This is what happens when you just set tools down all over the place. All right, I put a little anti-seize here on the brake pads, just on the outside. Helps everything move nicely. You can see I've also done the ends of the brake pads and then stuck them in. Now these two bolts back here, they get torqued down to 74 foot-pounds. And then we've got everything ready to go. We will now install, I guess we'll put this piece on now. So this hooks in like so, and then what we got to do is pull back on it, and you can see this slot that's right in here, and that's going to go in. Now, I wasn't too sure if this cable was seized. I might actually try to install this, and then I can really ream on that thing and get it in there. And if that doesn't work, then we'll have to take it back out. But I'm going to use the two original bolts that came out of the brake caliper guide pins, those 13 millimeters, because the heads of them are normal compared to the ones that we received out of the box. You can see we got one of these stupid bolts that's really short that likes to strip all the time, and then a regular looking one. So just gonna probably throw those out because they're stupid. But we'll get this set up. We will get these bolts installed. Now these get torqued down to 26 foot-pounds for those of you that like to torque your brakes. And one more thing to note is, you see this little tab that sticks out on the brake pad right there? There's one on the back brake pad as well. And if you look down into the brake caliper piston, you see that V-looking notch? The piston it needs to be clocked 12 and 6. The reason for that is so that when you slide this thing on, that notched V will slide into where this nub is. So you can see they clock it in the correct position when they rebuild these things so that you don't have issues. But if you were to push back a caliper, it is possible to have those two cutouts off-centered, and then you put it on and it'll be running into that dowel piece. You won't be able to get the caliper on, you'll be fighting it, and that's why. So we'll get these things torqued down and then see if we can fight this. This is going to be a real pain. Oops. There, just like that. If you had a seized cable, that would be a real pain to do. So everything luckily was moving. We were able to get that thing on there. Another wrench that you might need is one of these. Now this is 11/16 and 19/32, and this doubles for different size brake pins. Works fantastic. You could just use another regular wrench. Problem with some of the wrenches though is that they're too thick to get in between this shoulder on this pin and the actual caliper body. So I have one of these skinny wrenches, and I recommend picking one up if you don't have one. It really helps when you need to hold that pin from spinning when you're trying to tighten these bolts. So we'll just get these snugged up, and then I'll grab my torque wrench. We'll go ahead and torque these. All right, so we've got everything ready to go. Last thing you need to do is bleed the brakes. So in this case, we would check the reservoir, fill it up if it is low, and then go ahead and open this bleeder screw up. Most of them are either a 10 or an 11 millimeter bleeder screw. You'd open it up, and then you can just let the system gravity bleed, where the fluid will flow into the brake caliper and start to drip out. If you have a second person, that will be the best and the fastest way to do it. And I'll make another video on how to do that. I won't get too in depth with it, but other options include using a vacuum bleeder, or you can use a hose with a water bottle, and there's videos on how to do that as well. So that's about it. Once you get everything bled, you just take it for a road test, make sure everything's working good. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Got any comments, throw them down in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe.